Content warning. On this podcast, we discuss sensitive issues, including but not limited to swearing, tasteless jokes, mentions of drug use, and situations of a sexual nature. This podcast is not intended for children.
Welcome to the BiblioWrecks. I'm Bam Bam.
And I'm Bugs, where we read the worst stories the world has to offer. Bam Bam, what wrecked you this week?
I got wrecked by a little story called Ascend Online. It is a lit RPG, and it's incredibly middle of the road.
So just kind of boring?
It's pretty Camry.
Can you just let us know what a lit RPG is for the listeners?
Right. A lit RPG is basically a literary form of someone playing a video game, is the basic idea.
So is this like a side scroll or first person shooter idea?
More like Skyrim.
Skyrim, okay.
So Ascend Online came out very much in the time that they got super popular around 2015, 2016.
So this is like a new style of literature.
Yeah, it hasn't been around for a very long time, and it shows a lot. So I'll go ahead and just read my basic synopsis or summary of the story.
Yeah, tell us what happened.
So Ascend Online is a literary RPG that takes place in 2047 that follows the adventures of Lyrian, whose real-world name is Mark. Little is said of the actual reality in favor of going straight into the game. Ascend Online, a deep dive VR game taking place in an impossibly realistic fantasy setting. Upon entering the game and creating his avatar, Lyrian is routed to a part of the game he isn't supposed to be in. When everyone else in the tutorial is doing fetch quests, he is instead dropped in Ulford, a frontier town attacked by goblins. Nakedly, Lyrian defeated the threat of goblins and is given praise and clothes.
So this is basically if you were on YouTube watching other people play a game instead of watching yourself, but you don't get the benefit of video or sound or...
It's like someone transcribed someone else playing a video game for a while. Yep.
Good Lord.
It's just like that. He then explores and gathers more skills while learning about Ascend Online. After making a nemesis out of a puma, Lyrian's friends show up and validate their commitment to Ulford, seemingly due to its simple proximity to Lyrian, who is treated like the John Wick of video games. Lyrian and co. train on some spider enemies, just as a horde baited there by Lyrian swarm them. Lyrian then dies and respawns in Ulford. Once back in Ulford, Lyrian busies himself and the town NPCs into fortifying the small village against the onslaught of players that are headed to the town. Lyrian is chastised by an NPC for treating NPCs like NPCs.
Wait, it's a sentient NPC?
It very much tries to go that direction.
Is it making commentary on AI or just making it just to be weird?
Yeah, See, they all do this. All of them try to make their NPCs sentient like this. And for presumably no reason than to make it immoral to treat NPCs badly.
So making Grand Theft Auto a morality tale?
Yeah, like the woman you jacked her car from actually had kids and is now suffering because you took her one vehicle.
That sounds like it takes all the fun out of what the point of a game is.
That's not the only thing. So I'll get into that in a bit. Later, the town is attacked by increasingly strong and magical spiders. The players narrowly win against the spiders and continue training, crafting, and questing. During the battle, Lyrian was ambushed by his puma nemesis. Lyrian pursues the cat because he is now paranoid by it. He chases it into a nexus of magic where they both get trapped. The puma is trapped by some possessing magic of the world's evil deity. Lyrian decides to save it, and the creature becomes Lyrian's familiar because, of course, it does. Who is promptly named Amaranth, referencing immortality somewhere. I never checked up on it.
I think, isn't amaranth a plant?
I also thought it was a flower, but
I think it's like a seed or a grain.
Yeah, the game very much insists that it's a reference to immortality.
Fine.
Yeah,
yes.
It's
your
fine.
Story,
it's
man.
Fine. The two now bonded, leave the Nexus, and return to Ulford, both now changed by the magical ether. Larian and crew develop more skills, get stronger, but the player army is about to show up. The army is made up of a nondescript upper, middle, and prisoner slave class. Larian makes some plans and goes out to meet the leader of the army, a guy named Graves. Graves tells Larian his plot to become king using imprisoned players for some mysterious quest and for internet clout.
So are we like playing this with the player, or are we like watching him play the game like in his bedroom?
This is just following Larian. So deep dive VR in fiction is usually you get in a pod and you get IV, the nutrients you need for long-term staying in a pod.
So like the Matrix, but gaming?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you get to come out sometimes. And
okay, gotcha.
the forces of Ulford and Grave battle. The Ulford forces win through talent and tactics, but Graves escapes. Larian and his friends torture and cajole information out of a few surviving members of Graves' army and out of the freed prisoners. Outfitting and training some of the prisoners, Larian and a posse pursue Graves, who they now believe is under the influence of some cursed armor. After killing a few goblins and doing some arsony shenanigans and navigating a castle, Larian confronts Graves, who is now fully possessed by the dead king cursing Graves' armor. The Ghost King frees himself using some kind of plot magic ball. Larian fights the ghost, who kills Amaranth, so named for immortality, ironically. But it's only temporary, so it's fine.
Why do they...
Don't, it's fine. Larian's friends show up and distract the king so that Larian can kill him with the plot-powered magic ball that can not only free ghosts from armor, but also eats ghosts. Yes.
Okay.
Larian barely kills the ghost and unlocks another skill because it's been 5 paragraphs since the last one. The plot winds down by doing what it did for most of the book. Jargon about game mechanics and crafting. Larian says a temporary goodbye to the town of Ulford and logs out. The story ends by hooking the plot of the next book with Graves in prison, being offered a deal by the game's allegory for evil incarnate.
So, okay, you know that thing where a little kid will come up and talk to you about that video game that they played, and it's like Minecraft, like, and then I mined out this cave, and then I built a fire, and then a zombie came and I killed it, and then I cooked a spider, but they wanted you to... Did you pay for this book?
I did, like 3 years ago.
Okay. Did you get your money's worth?
I'm hopefully getting it now. But it's actually very apt that you use that child metaphor, because it's actually much worse than that.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm. So imagine that kid also had very detailed stat blocks of all the math and numbers and damage dealt throughout the entire gameplay that he's telling you about.
So the worst parts of D&D.
The worst parts of D&D.
Oh my goodness. I think I would drop that kid off at an orphanage.
Someone should. So my main gripes with this book throughout reading it were the main character is bland for the sake of the reader grafting themselves onto the protagonist.
Okay.
You know, kind of, because it's a power fantasy is what it is.
Right.
Yeah. He's literally a generic quip machine with nothing interesting to say except what he is currently doing to affect the game.
So he's kind of a impersonal NPC, and you are supposed to mentally be enjoying playing the game while reading it.
You're supposed to be vicariously enjoying this game through the medium of this very bland character.
Wow. How long was the story?
Well, since I was reading it through an audiobook, I think it was like 17 hours, but...
Look, 17 hours of that?
Mm-hmm.
And you still have your hair.
It was incredibly bland.
And you didn't fall asleep.
I was driving. I probably shouldn't.
Oh, wow. Man, 17 hours of that. And and there is a hook for more?
Oh yeah, there's 5 books.
Wow.
The functional text of what is going on at any given time reads like I'm watching a Twitch stream. The dialogue is either informational or an attempt at a witty joke.
Attempt.
It's an attempt. And a lot of the comedy isn't even... It's like a joke by association. Like, this person clearly reads a lot of memes
Oh, so everything is like current meme level jokes.
Yeah, more or less. You know the boot the snoot thing for
Yes.
people and their snakes?
Yes.
There was a bit about that.
Okay, so this is aimed at like young millennials or like Zoomers, like
Mhm.
teens.
Yeah,
Okay.
very much like gamer teen oriented.
Okay.
Which is why this actually saw some amount of success, because the target audience aren't critical readers, for one. They're
Mm.
mostly kids that if they have to read a book, they want to read a book about a video game.
Okay. I mean, I have literally bought books about Minecraft for my
Mhm.
kids, so I get it. I
Yeah.
try to get the ones that are how to build things and how to do this and that. But
Hmm.
there's a Netflix like story about kids and it's in Minecraft. Like they took Minecraft and made a story out of it
Mhm.
for kids. So I know it is possible to build a good story and a good world within that fantasy world.
Mhm. And that's kind of what this resembles more than anything. Like, I don't know if you haven't really played a lot of big RPGs like that.
Not really, no.
So a lot of times what, in my experience and a lot of people I know who play these kinds of video games, you'll be playing and you'll be like developing your own headcanon, like in Skyrim, for example, because it's a really good game, but it's also pretty bland. Like the most interesting things that happen in Skyrim are what you decide for the character yourself.
Okay. I know World of Warcraft, I think.
Mhm.
I know that was really popular when I was a teen, but it was too expensive for me to really invest in. And it sounded like people would spend a lot of time and a lot of money. And I just never was that deeply invested in a first person game like that.
Beyond that, speaking of jokes, the comedy mostly consists of shoehorned curse words and what I call the incredulity loop. So, what happens is the MC is forced to do either something drastic or weird that works out for them in several beneficial ways. Side characters will then remark, "Wow, you did a thing. I can't believe you did that thing." And the main character will say, "Yeah, it was nothing." And then the text then tells you how impressive the thing that the main character did was. And that just loops about 4 times throughout the course of the story.
Ah.
Mm.
Ah.
And a lot of these kinds of stories do that. And
Ah.
once you see it, you can't stop seeing it. Like if you're thoroughly invested in a story, that kind of thing works for a little while, but once you start seeing it in more than one story, it starts getting a little overplayed. And on top of that, the story seems like it was a sequel to something else. This is like an offshoot of another story. Like it seems like it's predicated on you already being familiar with lit RPGs, because if I hadn't already read a lot of other lit RPGs to already have a lot of the tropes and stuff established, I would have been totally lost by this.
So I would walk into it and not know what was going on
Yeah,
at
it
all.
would just look like absolute garbage. Which it's not great, but in the context of if you've already been into lit RPGs, then it's very middle of the road.
So this is like extremely niche. Like
Yeah.
this is a niche within a niche.
Mhm.
Okay.
And the ending of the book did what I hate books do, and it's so busy trying to sell you on the next installment in the series that it fails to have an interesting ending.
Mm.
So, how the book ends is they defeat the bad guy. They come back to the town of Ulford. He says a few generic things to the townspeople and his friends, and then he just logs out. And then the story's over. Nothing of import happened.
Huh. Wow.
And that's my main thing, is just that the character had no arc. He is just as bland and good at games and just a bore. Just a real
Mm.
bore at the beginning as he is at the end. So
That sucks. So there's no like real personality shining through or using it as a coping skill to avoid real life or any of it being tied into real life or
I mean, real life barely even comes into this. Like it reminds you that there's an outside world every now and then, but it basically has no impact on the story whatsoever.
So it seems like it would be better just to skip the role-playing game part of it and just write a fantasy world.
That's what I thought, because honestly, the worst parts about it are the video game parts.
Because, as a writer and a reader, we want to have a fun story and have an escape in a new world. But when you are kind of really squishing yourself into this tiny box because you are forced to log out, log in, have these weird stats, and it seems like if you took those pieces away from it, you could actually create an interesting world where maybe you did have people labeled as NPCs and you dealt with the morality around that, but like Westworld did a really good job of taking these people who aren't considered people and then showing their humanity. And you can have really interesting moral and philosophical discussions around that without it being relegated to Grand Theft Auto, stealing cars, and hitting people with a baseball bat.
Yeah, you're not going to get any kind of deep philosophy out of this one. Basically, do you treat people-shaped things like people is a deep question in this book.
Oh, man.
Yeah, how do you contend?
Right. I mean, that sounds like a good question to ask a 9-year-old because that can teach empathy and show their level of development, but that's not really what this sounds like it's even aimed at.
Yeah, it's really confusing because it's so shallow that you would think it's for a kid to be able to try to comprehend, but also there are a lot of fuck words.
Oh, okay. So not a PG read.
No, super not. You know what won't bust your knees with a baseball bat?
What?
These ads.
Nice. Hello, Biblio freaks, geeks, and lovers. Bugs here with a couple of notes. We have a Patreon where every month we focus on a bad book, bad movie combo. Please leave comments and suggestions on our Facebook page or email us at BiblioWrecks@gmail.com. That's spelled BiblioWrecks@gmail.com. We are on all the socials at BiblioWrecks. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you are enjoying these bad books as much as we are.
And we're back.
Was there any other explicit content or just a lot of cussing?
No, just cussing.
Oh, okay.
Like a 10-year-old who is away from his parents for the weekend.
Jay was playing video games around Christmas time, and he got so mad because these 13-year-olds were calling him old and cussing him out and being really rude, and he threw down his headphones and stomped away. He's like, I'm in my 30s. I'm not old. These fucking 13-year-olds trying to get me. Get wrecked, Grandpa. And he had to quit those couple of games because these little kids had all this attitude and they were cussing him out. And he was used to being the youngster on the other end, and now he's on the receiving end of that.
I think I'll go ahead and just read my notes. Number 1, this is just power fantasy BS.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Do you know what a game UI is?
A game what?
UI. So game UI it's like your health bar and whatever extraneous information is on the outside border of the screen, like a mini map.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. The game UI is just as annoying being read as it is cluttering up the game screen.
Oh, jeez.
The story makes a big deal about NPCs being super real. Story then treats NPCs and the real people like NPCs for the rest of the story. There's also a weird thing that's in a lot of lit RPGs, and I can't quite figure it out. There's a weird coffee trope. For some reason, the main character is always obsessed with coffee. in some mode or fashion.
That not energy drinks?
Nope.
Coffee.
Yeah, weird, right?
That for that age group, yeah, because you would think sodas, Mountain Dew,
I think that's a bit of a self-insert because for some reason a lot of writers, as far as I can tell, in popular media are very attached to coffee.
I mean, it is the one socially acceptable addiction that we can have, and people will applaud it. Oh, yeah, I have great coffee, How do you take your coffee? And it could become, it's kind of like, how's the weather? But for millennials. There's a great coffee shop downtown.
And we're not down in coffee either, so.
No, I love coffee.
Yeah.
I love coffee.
Normalize meth.
Please don't. Because that'll be methed up.
No, we're better than that.
I will every time. That will be methed up every time you make a meth joke.
All right, that's fine. We'll avoid those from now on. Let's see. In a lot of these lit RPGs, there's always a deity representing the AI mind that's making these games.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and for some reason they have like a weird interest in the main character.
Special boy syndrome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, you're the special boy, and that's exactly why his character was sent to Ulford instead of the main area like everybody else was.
Maybe you should read Ready Player One. I haven't read it because it sounds like it's exactly that. It's special boy syndrome and then just gaming stats.
Yeah.
Is what it sounded like. I know they made a movie, but I haven't watched it or read it because it sounded not my wheelhouse. But,
Hold on, I've got a quote that I'm going to read you now. And, just be aware that this is like a third of what the entire book is. It's just reading these stat blocks. And this is after one of his little forays into the wilderness, and he comes back and he's trying to set up a bunch of equipment to get ready for the next one. Assembling a few sets of armor and weapons, stifling a yawn, I quickly glanced over the fruits of my labor over the last night. Bronze-studded leather tunic, 5. Bronze-studded leather pants, 5. Hardened leather boots, 5. Hardened leather gloves, 5. Bronze-studded cap, 5.
No, make it stop.
Bronze longsword, 2. Bronze short sword, 2.
Oh, no.
Bronze mace, 1. With the refining and crafting, my leatherworking skill doubled to reach level 8.
This is D&D leveling your character.
It's just,
no.
It's painful. Like, a third, I very seriously think that a third of the text is just that stuff.
Oh.
And it's just...
That sounds dangerous to read while driving. I would pass out from exhaustion.
Like, if you can get invested in the story and really care about what kind of character the author is making, sure, but I've read about a dozen of these, and I don't know what level any of them are at any given point, so I just can't...
So these are fictional games, created for the story, but they're basically, roughly built around, Skyrim, those kind of games? Or is it a specific game genre?
A lot of the older games, you got your Fallouts, or there was another one, I can't remember. I never got to play it because relatively young. A lot of the stuff that happens, as you're doing actions, you'll do an attack and there's just about a quarter of the screen, usually on the right side, tells you exactly how much damage you've done and how much damage the enemy is doing to you and what you're using, stuff like that.
Okay.
And it very much reads like that. Another one. Who wants to play a game like this? They're literally digging digital ditches at one point. Who's having fun right now? And they're in these games for what they perceive as 10 days at a time. And this doesn't seem fun.
So it's Animal Crossing without the cute little animals to play with and talk to.
Yeah, instead of talking to the cute little animals, you stab them for numbers.
Jeez. I mean, that just sounds like torture to me.
Yeah, there was a point at the very beginning of the book, the very little bit of reference to the the real world that it made was to the world's economy. Like, I guess the author had to justify all these kids playing these games, or all these young people.
Oh, and this was before COVID, so you couldn't even insert, like, we were in lockdown for 3 months.
No one had thought of that yet.
Right. Wow.
So the millennials, because the story takes place in 2047, so all the millennials are grown up and old.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The millennials have all the jobs and won't retire and die because medicine has gotten so much better. People are living longer and working longer. So the millennials just keep working and won't let the young people have jobs. And that was the scariest fucking thing I've ever read. Everyone else under the age of 40-ish is apparently jobless and spends their time playing video games.
Wow.
And that, honestly, I could have just listened to the rest of the book just talking about that.
Right, because that could be a whole world-building thing on its own.
Yep. But nope, that's just a throwaway line.
Oh, don't you hate those where you're like, okay, this was such a bore, this was a slog, and then you have these little scraps that could have been really interesting. Those are honestly the biggest parts for me that make an book bad. Because it's like, no, you had something there. You could have used this. Like, come on, you could have built more from this. Because, I mean, you can just have a bad book and it's just bad. But when you see someone with genuine talent and then it's not used or practiced, it's like, oh, no.
I really don't think that's what happened here. I think what happened here is a young person accidentally hit upon something interesting and then ignored it.
Quite possibly. Do you know anything more about the author?
No, I didn't look super hard into it. I looked up some of the Amazon reviews and tried to find his Facebook, but I didn't look incredibly hard. Yeah, and then my final point, if the NPCs suck Larian's dick any harder, they're going to be eating eyeballs by the end of the book.
Wow.
I really don't like the main character.
Couldn't tell. I could not tell.
Yep. So that's all the bad things I have to say about this book. Here are some good things.
Oh.
Yeah, there are some good things.
Okay.
Actually, like I said, this is very middle of the road. The author does have a good way of like weaving well-known video game mechanics into the story and make them sound interesting. Like if you can suspend your disbelief enough, it's really like the way you would want a video game to be. And that's a nice little fantasy sometimes. The author definitely understands what's going on in his audience's head when they play video games. Like what I was saying earlier, like with the head canon while you're playing, like you're inserting into your character who is usually a non-speaking, bland person themselves.
Right.
The story does do one of my favorite things, which is to give some attention to skills that are often ignored in video games and the fantasy genre in general. And I'll stand for anyone who wants to give the alchemy skill some love.
Oh, yeah. Fun. So was there like a lot of potions and things you could make and build? Yeah,
like it went into that and a lot of the crafting and stuff like that. Like as long as you could ignore like all the numbers and stuff that were really in the way. It was really conceptually neat, a lot of the crafting stuff. That and the spells are well imagined and fun. Like the main character's class is a spell sword. Sometimes it's just fun to listen to somebody hitting things with magic and watching them die. That can sometimes be entertaining. My overall good point on this is Ascend Online being a senseless romp isn't necessarily a bad thing. If you don't need an overarching plot and just enjoy some good action writing with a veneer of fantasy video game on top, this is an okay book.
So out of our list, we have how big of a wreck was this ride? And at the top, we have the Enterprise. This was not a wreck. It was amazing. We have Grey Eagles from The Hobbit. We have Link's Glider from Zelda. F-22 Raptor would be pretty awesome. Hot Air Balloon. Could be a wreck. Could be great. Camry, boring. Just middle of the road boring. And then for the true Rex, we have Rose's Door. We all know.
From the Titanic.
From the Titanic. We have the Hindenburg.
From history.
The Hindenburg from history and the Titan death sub that took billionaires to the bottom of the ocean.
Sad.
Not. So, how big of a wreck was this ride?
I feel somewhere, I'm going to say Camry, but only within the context of literary RPGs. If you put it in the world of books overall, it's definitely around Rose's Door, maybe Hindenburg.
Right, because if you're in your niche's niche, and then you have your comparison there. Pretty different than your comparison with Lord of the Rings or Hunger Games or any other million wonderful fantasy stories.
Yeah, super not one of those.
Gotcha. Next episode, we will be suffering through When Good Men Do Nothing, found in the anthology No More Heroes, and it looks like a doozy. Nothing happens till the last page. Follow us on Facebook, listen to amusing readings on TikTok, and tell a friend about your favorite wreck. If you have read a terrible story and want to share, email us at BiblioWrecks@gmail.com. Show notes are on the website at BiblioWrecks.com, spelled BiblioWrecks.com. Thank you, Bam Bam, and thank you to our bibliotech owls and Jay. Thank you, listeners, for suffering through this week's demolition of
Ascend Online. And thank you, Luke Chimolenko, for really just fucking up my week.
I mean, it sounds like you were entertained, but also given fodder for our current hobby.
It's entertained in the same way as, like, hate watching someone on YouTube.
Watching a train wreck, can't look away.
Yeah, kind of one of those. But I think that's it for the week. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Biblio freaks, geeks, and lovers, for joining us today. Send your Biblio recommendations to BiblioWrecks@gmail.com. We are also at BiblioWrecks on Patreon and all the socials. Thank you for all the bad books and good laughs. Goodbye.